And we're live. Okay, Friday, February 27th, 2026, here in House Transportation. Floor has gone longer than maybe was planned for, so the presentation that was scheduled for 11 is bumped until a future date, and we're going to move forward with what was on our first part of our schedule, which is the start of our markup on this year's, on the 2027 T-bill. Damian Leonard from Ledge Council in. The goal here is to go through the original submission, check off and agree to the parts that we are certain of, and then potentially add a couple of the other pieces that we've looked at or that are hanging, that have been proposed for addition. So with that, we're handed over to you.
Great. Thank you. For the record, I'm Damian Leonard from the Office of Legislative Counsel. I'll pull up the first draft of the T-bill that we looked at all the way back at the end of January, I think. And what I'm going to do is I'll go through, if you have notes on the sections, I'm going to make notes in the draft here so that I can start amending it when we return from the town meeting break. And then once I get through it, we can start talking about other things that should be added to the next draft. I'll make a note of that, and I think that'll get us through. So the first section here, this is just the standard transportation program adoption and definitions. This is in every T-bill. The only thing that might change here, depending on what you put into the bill, are the definitions. What I've done for purposes of this draft is just to cut and paste last year's definitions into here. I would suggest that we revisit this later on the final draft just to go through the definitions, and I'll let you know if I've added or taken any out at that point. But right now, depending on what we add in or move forward with, the definitions might change. Any questions on that? Okay.
Pretty comfortable with the idea that this would get checked off as standard operating procedure? Kind of thumbs up?
Yep. Just with a revisit to check those definitions later.
Revisit if any changes or any additions.
Yep.
Otherwise, we're good to go.
Yeah. So the next is the Municipal Heavy Equipment Loan Fund, which is actually now the Municipal Equipment and Vehicle Loan Fund, which tells you how old the rules are that are being repealed here. So if all of you can think back to when we talked about this last, this is a program that's been administered by the treasurer for several years, but the statutes were not updated to reflect that. So this provides loans to municipalities to purchase highway equipment and vehicles. Originally it was designed for heavy equipment like road graders and that sort of thing. There are rules that are still on the books from I believe it was the Transportation Board who used to administer it. And those rules are outdated and have been superseded by updates to the statute that occurred in last year's big bill that were supposed to be technical amendments clarifying the rulemaking authority. Unfortunately, when the Secretary of State and LCAR were contacted this past summer with notice that the rules were going to be repealed by operation of law, we reviewed the statute in the Administrative Procedure Act for how that's supposed to occur and determined that the language in the big bill last year did not actually meet the standard to repeal the outdated, obsolete rules. So this is a technical amendment to repeal those rules. I'm seeing some confusion. So the Transportation Board adopted rules for a program that back when they administered it, they no longer administer these loans, might be longer than that. These rules are outdated and obsolete. There was language put into last year's big bill to clarify who had the authority to adopt procedures and what the requirements were. Because the Treasurer's Office has been administering this loan fund. That language unfortunately did not include language saying the rules shall be repealed or this shall supersede the existing rules or other language that would have operated to repeal those rules in the T-bill. So we need to have cleanup language in this bill to repeal the rules, because essentially you have obsolete rules for a loan fund that has changed its scope, changed its name, and changed who administers it. So these rules are no longer consistent with what's actually happening. We just need to put language in the bill that actually gets them off the books.
The fund is still.
The fund is still there. It's still there, and it'll continue being administered the way it has been for the last several years at least. Treasurer's office will continue administering it. And this is one of those things that slipped through the cracks when we were working on language for the big bill last year. I believe that I reviewed that language, but didn't realize that there was another set of rules. And so it wasn't until this past summer that we made the connection and realized that the language hadn't done what it needed to do in terms of repealing the rules. It did clean up any technical discrepancies on who's administering, who adopts procedures, et cetera.
I've also spoken to the JFO about funding has no T-fund related. I talked to the agency, that's the T-board request with the support of the Ledge Council. It's my summary of it, I guess, is what Damien's saying, but in talking to JFO and talking to the agency and talking to the Ledge Council, they thought they corrected a technical correction. Now we have to correct our technical correction to get the language out to a fund that hasn't touched the T-fund in over 10 years and is not managed by any of our staff or any of their staff or people. It's entirely within the Treasury Department. They do still loan out money, but it has nothing to do with transportation and the T-board. It's sitting there. They thought they cleaned it up and they didn't, and now they're trying to clean it up again. I know there was questions about the fund itself and whatnot. That would be informational only in terms of the treasurer, sort of where I left off that.
There's no proposal to change the loan program or the funding or how it's administered, and nothing will change. With that, what this is doing is taking obsolete regulations from back when it was with the Transportation Board off the books. So they thought they'd accomplished that last year, but unfortunately, we had a miscommunication in the about the language in the big bill. And I'm pretty sure that I reviewed it and said, this looks fine to me, not realizing that we were also trying to repeal the rules by operation of law. So
Job security.
Make it work for us. It's
not the way I want to earn job security.
Anybody have concerns, or if people are okay with it? If your thumbs up or they want to hear more. Person White.
Just a quick question. So, just so I can understand, has this always been administered by the treasurer, or was that a change that happened
That's a change that happened
at some
a number
point?
of years ago.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And so last year's language was supposed to clean up some of the remnants of when it had been administered by the Transportation Board. And this is the last remnant that was missed by last year's legislation. So.
Any other questions or concerns about this? Are we thumbs up with leaving this in or keeping this in the bill?
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you, Representative Keiser. All right.
Okay. For
make a note though, let's make sure for presentation, we find out the date that the T-board transferred over to the T-board over to the treasurer's office. If you could find us a date for whoever presents this section, that we'd be ready to answer that section. Or answer any question of when that happened, just for our presentation portion. I think we all have a good lesson of making sure that if you take a section, you want to make sure you know everything about it. You may never get asked, but you might get asked.
Case it tickles rat down.
You gotta stay on your toes.
Yep,
a glimpse into the floor action this morning, huh?
I didn't say that. I didn't say that. Next.
All right. So the next section 3 would update the language around the standards and guidance for design of the roads here. This is essentially a technical change here. What we're saying, instead of develop and implement, is maintain state standards and guidance. And then the language in the second sentence that's being struck is redundant with the third sentence, which also says design speeds lower than legal speeds. So it implies that design speeds may be lower than legal speeds. May be used without the requirement of a formal design exception if appropriate warning signs, signals, and markings are used, which essentially does exactly what the provided appropriate warnings are posted did, with a little bit more clarity. And this is already, we were talking yesterday about the MUTCD. This is already laid out in that, and the Vermont state design standards will reflect those requirements. So when you have a highway that's 45 miles an hour, but you have a 30-mile-an-hour curve, you're all familiar with the yellow and black chevrons, and then the curve warning sign that might have a different speed limit, et cetera. That's what this is talking about. So you don't need an exception for the design if you're just warning drivers ahead of time that they need to slow down, that you have a sharp curve, or whatever it is.
In the note, in the testimony, we discussion with the agency. And I think we had a little bit of discussion on it, was presented before. There was a note about, this sort of shows a little bit about the incremental improvements and changes over time, because back when the language was written, there weren't state standards. And now there weren't related to these pieces, and now there are. And they're continuing to be updated and revised again. So the agency's view on planning and piece has changed. Here's some incremental steps over the years. Yeah. Bill's got a thumbs up. Anybody else? Representative Crouch has a thumbs up. Anybody else have a thumbs up or down? A question? Anybody have a question about this section? Representative White?
I do.
That's why we're here.
Okay, so Damien, I hear, so in situations where there's a sharp curve going from 50 to 35, I get that. Would this also apply to like school crossings, like when you're, counting highway, coming into a school zone?
Yep. Yeah. So this is the same thing. If you're any place where you need to lower the speed because of the road conditions, including what's happening around the road, traffic, trucks entering. For example, if you have, I'm thinking of a spot near a sand and gravel location where there are trucks entering that I've driven by, where they lower the speed so that you have more reaction time because of the sight lines on the road. Anytime where you have that sort of the engineering requirements based on the conditions around it indicate that you should lower the speed, even though the legal speed on that highway is 45, 55, 35, whatever it is. This allows you to do it with proper signage instead of having to go through the process of getting a design exception.
And this change, it's not changing any practice, it's just kind of cleaning up some language.
Yes.
Yeah, I'm all set.
Representative Powell?
And the design exception is an exception to the National Highway System, right?
Or to the Vermont state standards, et cetera. So, yeah.
We have the limit, here's the limit, but no. This
Right.
allows it to be not.
Exactly. This allows you to go below the limit without asking for a formal exception to the specific designs for that type of highway. And this is something that, so if you think about Cemetery Curve over here on Route 2, as you're leaving town heading towards Dairy Cream, that is an example of this here. The road width doesn't change. The shoulders don't change. The painted lane width doesn't change, but you do have a lower speed through that curve. You've got the chevrons and a speed warning on the curve to slow down because it's a sharp 90-degree curve. on what is I believe a 35 or 40 mile an hour road at that point. And so there are instances like that, I think you'll find, where the road is built to the same design standards, but you're changing the speed and lowering the speed there for safety purposes.
Is there, like, can you go down to 5 miles an hour? Or is that like, get into like the lower?
You still get into the
So you get into the traffic.
the same sort of traffic and
Oh.
engineering study
So
requirements
we're
and
just
so
talking
forth.
about
Yeah.
the science.
Yeah, this is really just saying that you can, it's a statement of policy that we're not going to require a design exception to lower the speed limit below the legal speed limit. You still have to go through the process that's set out for setting speed limits. And this,
No, I'm talking about that particular
Yeah.
one or the-
so if you remember yesterday,
Yeah,
the first statute I talked about was state speed zones.
yeah,
A speed zone is one of these instances here where it's different from the legal speed limit for that type of highway.
okay,
And you've lowered the zone. So this could be a school zone, could be a sharp curve, it could be a densely, an area that's dense with driveways and crossings. And so you want to lower speeds because there are a lot of vehicles entering, et cetera. Could be an area where steep grades, so you have limited sight lines, things like that. But yeah, this is covered by the state speed zone language. This would also be the sort of thing that a municipal legislative body could do, and then they can lower their speeds. And it's just a general statement of policy. The actual mechanics are all set out in Title 23.
okay, yeah. So that's a 5 minutes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I kind of almost wondering if we need another definition. Because this is for projects not on the National Highway Speed System. So I'm kind of wondering that, I think that would include some state highways.
Mhm.
So some state highways are part of the National Highway System and some are not. So, just to kind of, think about yesterday and all the discussion about what applies where and how do you know, and that sort of thing.
So this is basically everything that's not on the national highway system. So it would encompass, like all of we're in two different titles here.
Okay.
So this is Title 19, talking about general highway construction and highway projects. So this is not how do you set the speed limit. This is what do you do when you're building a road and you have different speed limits as you go through the road because of certain conditions. And this is a statement of policy guiding what you do in those road projects. So when you do a project, say as you're resurfacing Route 2 on your way out to Dairy Cream to deal with the heavy traffic for Creamies, when you redo the signage after that resurfacing project, how are you setting out the signage? And this is saying that you can set out signage for a lower than legal speed, and all of that setting the speed limit is out in Title 23. So the process for doing that is in Title 23. But here, you can use those lower speed limits provided you have appropriate signage. And so this is really talking about what do you do when you're putting the road together, when you're constructing it. And so now as the engineers are laying out the specifications for the projects, they're going to say, we're going to install curve warning signs here. We're going to install the chevrons. We'll have a speed warning sign for that lower speed zone, whatever it is that they might have. If you think about Route 2 going further out as you come into Middlesex, where you get through the curves there and it's densely packed, the speed drops from 50 to 35. As you go through there, there's a warning because there's also a rise, so you don't have a sight line. So there's a warning there that tells you, and a curve, tells you you're about to enter a lower speed zone. Then you have the speed zone sign that starts it. Then as you come through the curves, there are other tight curve warnings with chevrons. And then as you're exiting the speed zone, you now have new speed limit signs, and the same coming the other way, where there's a rise going up to the on-ramp for the interstate, and then it drops down a hill. You have speed zone warnings there, and that's what this is talking about. So as you're constructing that, and the engineers are laying that out, this is telling them use appropriate warning signs, signals, and markings. And as long as you need to do that, you don't need to get an exception from the design standards for this lower speed zone area. That's what this is saying. This is not saying, this is not getting into how the traffic committee or the legislative body of the municipality sets their own speed limits. So I'm not sure we need a new definition here. This is just really kind of setting out what's our policy for projects that aren't on the national highway system. Did everyone follow that? Sorry, this is all very clear in my head because I drive that road about 6 times a week. So, but I'm not sure how familiar the rest of the committee is with these road sections.
Talk about all the other roads too.
Priority.
All right.
I mean, Representative Wiley, this is an area that you're always zeroed in on, or you're.
But yeah, I'm good.
Okay.
Representative Teaser's a thumbs up? Okay.
Yes.
Thank you, Julia.
Okay, next we're getting to the duties of the Agency of Transportation. And the first change here on lines 2 and 3 is just a technical change to get rid of the old-fashioned language, just the sum required by the agency. And we're talking about sureties here, which is basically a bond or other deposit that's necessary to guarantee that conditions in the contract are followed. So it's money to ensure that the amounts due in the contract get paid. And what the agency had asked for, the substantive change, is down here, allowing the Secretary of Transportation the discretion to waive the requirement for a bond in contracts of 250,000 or less. This would be an increase over the current amount of 100,000 or less. And then the next change in subdivision B, during an emergency event, giving the secretary discretion to waive the bonding requirements for immediate temporary stabilization work related to public safety or state infrastructure, providing that any permanent work, so the permanent work to make repairs, would still be subject to any of the bonding requirements.
So it's implied here that no matter what the cost of the contract, a bond is required. And then the secretary can, for anything under 250,000, have it waived.
Yeah, so secretary can make a determination if it's under 250,000 or if it's an emergency. So, and my recollection of the agency's testimony here is they're looking to simplify contracting when we have a flooding event or something like that. And they need to get work out there to prevent the road from deteriorating faster. Or
100,000 doesn't go very far.
No, that's cuts to get a lawyer to write the bond.
Has the agency, so in past emergency events, without this language, have they been bonding for work, or have they?
so that's a better question for them. I think they've had discretion to waive it below 100,000. But in this case, they're asking both to raise that cap and to just provide a blanket. And so my understanding is that they're asking for the emergency event language because there are instances where there's temporary stabilization work is costing more than that cap.
Yeah.
And they're still required to get a bond, which can delay being able to contract for that.
When I don't know if this helps, but to comment from the notes that I wrote here from the discussions, but also from one of the presentations from the agency, during any particular event, they would use about a dozen have used up to a dozen more contractors than they would use during their regular time per event. So envision it that you have an event, an emergency, and the AOTs, everybody's out doing their things, and there's still a problem. Jim's Excavating is in their town. They will grab them and put them to work right away for up to a portion because the rest of the things are going on. And they'll use about a dozen of the Jim's Excavatings in areas during an event. And if they had to wait to do this, then they couldn't use Jim's Excavating. But if he's going over $250,000, then we probably need to make sure that Jim's Excavating's got the bond behind them to do the work, but we need to be able to respond, or the agency wants to be able to respond more effectively to that. And their testimony said, or their comments, they use about a dozen of these every time there's an emergency event. If it's a declared emergency event, we're not talking about, a rainstorm, we're talking about emergency events. And they have used about a dozen per major event. And that is the way that I understood the situation, that they would just be able to, the secretary can just declare we're using them, and then we'll figure out after we get to $250,000, we stop the emergency or whatever, that we'll get back to the way we normally bond. And I sometimes think that 250 might not be enough in today's world, but we're going to go with or I'd like to go with what they requested. Representative Clark.
Like, they did 2011, and they got that road built in 3 weeks. They just didn't, there were no bonds, or they just like went in to do that.
Well, I think there was an executive order, right?
Yeah, right.
Yes, that's what he said. He goes,
Cheese or anything else?
so he said, do we need to do?
Yeah.
Bruce back.
This has anything to do with projects going out to bid, right?
No, so this is the,
Not
If
for
you
the
have a-
emergency part, but for like 250, they don't need to bid that, or is that like have any tie into that? I'm just-
I would have to look at the requirements for
Yeah.
when we're required to put it out to bid versus when you can give a sole source.
Yeah, so I'm just wondering, like, Chair Walker said, well, let's just, raising was just a good idea, but I'm just wondering if that coincides with what has to go out to bid.
Yeah,
Like, tied together.
I'll make a note.
That's what
to-
I'd say.
Um, yeah, I can't remember off the top of my head what the threshold is for when you have to bid a contract. Um,
Then other questions on? Did we get to the full end of the?
We did not, so those bonds are for compliance with the terms of the contract, including payment of subcontractors. This next one, is an additional bond, for payment of labor, material men, and others executed, for the execution of, or for those payments, including for material, merchandise, labor, rent, hire vehicles, etc. So this is basically ensuring that the state is not going to get sued as the entity that's contracted for this work. So it's basically when we pay you as a contractor, you're guaranteeing that you're going to pay for any equipment that you rent, any material that you purchase to do the job, and you're not going to leave us on the hook. The other technical change in here is the contributions to the Vermont Commissioner of Labor. The only contributions that are made to the Vermont Commissioner of Labor are for the payment of unemployment insurance. So I've clarified that in here. It's everything else is workers' comp is paid to your insurance company, et cetera. So, and then we are renumbering until we get down to, again, increasing from 100,000 to 250,000 and adding language in here for during an emergency event, for immediate emergency stabilization work related to public safety or state infrastructure. You can waive the bonding requirements, so identical to above. They're just two different types of bonds. One's for execution of the terms of the contract. The other is for paying for any material, labor, or rentals. Questions?
Yeah,
At least one thumbs up.
any questions? Okay. Representative Keiser, who's up there? All right. Anybody else have concerns? We did go through a few of those, so.
All right. We're at noon. Do you want to keep going, Mr. Chair?
I'd like to,
Okay.
yeah, I don't know if we can get all the way through, but I want to make sure that
We're almost there. So the next is the bridge inspections, posting and closure. So this is a new section. This is bringing us into compliance with the National Bridge Inspection Standards. So we're defining bridge to mean a structure to which those standards apply under federal regulations. The agency shall inspect bridges on state highways and town highways in accordance with those standards. For municipally maintained bridges, the agency would advise the municipality of their findings and any noted deficiencies, notify them if it requires posting or closure, and require the municipality to post or close the bridge upon receiving the notification, and give the agency authority to immediately post or close a bridge if it finds that there's an imminent hazard. And then finally provide that the municipality, because it's municipally maintained bridge, is responsible for all costs and expenses. For agency maintained bridges, the agency has the sole responsibility and authority to determine whether it shall be posted or closed, except that a municipality may close it during an emergency. And then if a municipality becomes aware of deficiencies or structural conditions, they're required to promptly notify the agency. Agency is responsible for all costs. And then the enforcement and penalties, in addition to any other penalties provided, person that violates the posting or closure shall be subject to a civil penalty of up to $1,000. When we spoke about this last, there were some questions about municipal authority to post and close roads and bridges already. There is already existing authority. I don't have time to run through it today, I don't think, but there's existing authority. We adopted new authority with respect to covered bridges a few years ago to give municipalities more authority to set, for example, height, weight, and length limits so that you can't have vehicles on there that can't make it across the bridge or might damage the structural supports of the bridge as they cross. There is also municipal authority to set weight limits in town. And then statewide, there's a chapter, it's about 45 sections long or 35 sections long. I forget exactly how many. It's quite lengthy. That sets out everything from per axle weight limits on highways to how you can adjust those weight limits, where overweight vehicles can travel, differences in weight limits between the interstate and other state highways. They're lower on the interstate than they are on other state highways. So I can do a presentation on that, but there's quite a lot of material to get through. So there's already a lot of existing authority. What this does is it brings us into line with the requirements under the National Bridge Inspection Standards, which go to things like if you're doing a bridge inspection and you realize that one of the metal tensioning pieces has snapped because it's become brittle over time, you can immediately close that bridge. Or if you're looking at the bridge and you determine that there's enough deterioration to warrant lowering the weight requirements or prohibiting trucks, you can do that under this in compliance with those standards. And so a lot of this is, as I understand it, reflecting existing practices, but adding language to ensure that we come into compliance with the federal requirements.
Representative Gordon?
So as I said before, this is exactly what happened to when we were in bridge closure, municipal bridge closure. This is exactly what.
Yeah, the addition here is the addition of the penalty,
Yeah.
which is adding another penalty that can be levied on top of other penalties.
Okay, I have a note here. Is this new penalty? But I
Yes.
just have an answer written here. Yes, it is.
It is a new penalty.
That'll have to be, do I need to run that by Trish here, run by anybody else? Does anybody have to run that by as Ways and Means? We'll see it. And anything else we have to do is a new penalty.
It is a new penalty.
Is there anything we have to do to any other?
You might ask judiciary if they want to take a look at it. It's a civil penalty. So the penalty would be enforced. If you're going to collect a civil penalty, that's through a court action if it's not paid. So
I also want to let people know that I had requested if the Vermont League of Cities and Towns wanted to weigh in on it. And I believe that, my note indicates that back in early February that they didn't see the need to respond. I went to the Truck and Bus Association related to trucks and weights, and they said that they were okay with it. They didn't think that it was more than needed them to come in, but that doesn't mean we have to take that. I'm just saying I did reach out to both of them out in this section, made sure they were aware of it, and Bill Smith actually did come up to committee the one day, from Vermont Truck and Bus Association. Those are my notes. And the agency also testified this can happen up to 6, they say sometimes 6 to 10 times in a year. So that was a lot, I thought.
Yeah, you mean the penalty?
I thought that the bridge issues where they have emergency repairs and closures, 6 to 10 times a year. That's a lot. It tells you something about the condition of our bridge and why we need more money. Representative White.
Yeah, Damien, I'm not sure you can answer this question, but can you remind us, who is inspecting the bridges? Is AOT inspecting?
yeah,
Even if it's a town bridge, they're doing the,
yeah.
yeah, okay. they're-
AOT is doing the
Oh,
inspections.
Okay, on an annual basis.
And then they're notifying the town if it's a town maintained bridge.
Okay. Thank you.
Wow.
Yeah, didn't we talk about having a higher fee than $1,000? I mean, this for the whole thing with the covered bridges, right?
We did, but then I believe, maybe we need to get further clarification. My memory on that question was that we would really be in a judiciary because there's this thing of the reasonable and I'm not a lawyer, but the
Yeah.
fair and reasonable punishment or something to that
You
effect.
can't just do it because you feel that we ought to be able to.
Because
Really
they deserve
Hammer them,
it.
yeah.
But there still is
Okay, yeah.
I'm not saying cruel and unusual, but there's a reasonable and
Yeah. Okay.
whatever, there's another standard that goes with cruel and unusual is also reasonable and something, I don't.
Yeah, so just and reasonable or something along those lines. It's under the same part of the Constitution. So basically a civil penalty has to be proportional or reasonably related to the gravity of the offense that it's punishing. So the most obvious case on this one, one that's cited a lot is there is a statute at the federal level that requires you, if you're taking more than $10,000 in cash out of the country, to report it to US Customs as you're leaving the country. There's no tax on it. There's nothing like that, but you have to report it. And they want this reporting because they want to be able to track if there's potentially something else going on when a large amount of cash is leaving the country. An individual paying off a debt in their home country was leaving the US with $130,000 or $140,000 in cash. They did not report it to US Customs. So the federal government moved to seize the full amount of that cash for failing to report it. And this is like 20 years ago, 30 years ago, something like that. The Supreme Court held the $5,000 penalty in federal statute would have been appropriate, but moving to seize the full $140,000 of cash was not reasonably related to a reporting violation when they weren't importing drugs or anything like that. No, it wasn't harming public safety. And so they went through this whole list of considerations. So with these considerations, we kind of look at like, what's the risk to the public? What's the risk to harming infrastructure, et cetera? We have a schedule of penalties already for overweight vehicles that it increases the more you go overweight, thus increasing the risk to the infrastructure and the public. And then we have additional specialized penalties for things like harm to a covered bridge. So there are special considerations because of the nature and historical importance of covered bridges, things like that.
Does that mean in theory, if you were to do something, you could get smacked with like a couple of different fines might apply? Okay, that cumulatively would be maybe not a very pleasant bill to have to.
Right, and it depends on the gravity of the offense.
Okay.
And but generally, most civil penalties are upheld as long as they're reasonably related to the gravity of the offense. But it's same thing like life in prison for shoplifting would be on the other side of this, a cruel and unusual punishment. But a fine or a, other short sentence might be appropriate depending on the amount that's stolen.
Just trying to protect our towns that are so cash strapped. Yeah.
Right. A lot of these penalties are also not going back to the towns necessarily. But we could get into how this gets broken out when you've got a civil fine that's levied.
All right, thank you.
So, yeah. Sorry, that was a long explanation. I know it's getting late. Questions on that section?
I got a thumbs up from the ranking member. Any thumbs up all around? Okay. Okay, traffic violations. So subdivision 11 and 12 here, this is not new language. The additional language in here is throughout the rest of the section, we explain what all of our cross references are referring to. I just added in the explanations to make this consistent. Subdivision 13, though, is new, and it's just cross-referencing back to that penalty for using a bridge in violation of the posting or closure of that bridge. So this is just relating back to the last section. I have no serious, just technical. Technical in nature. Not a new policy, technical.
Yeah, it goes hand in hand with the previous section.
We added a new fine. Okay, does anybody, I don't want people to feel rushed, but is there any questions about this at all?
How come?
Yep.
How come you, in section 11, you have to add the operation of prohibited vehicle and smuggler's notch?
It's just for consistency with the rest of the section. For whatever reason, in subdivisions 1 through 10, we have those citations and we tell you what it relates to. In subdivisions 11 and 12, we don't. And so just for consistency, and this also adds a little clarity for the reader.
So that violation is just for smuggler's notch.
1006BB is a violation for smuggler's notch. Preview of coming attractions. The penalty is being proposed to be raised in the motor vehicle bill. We'll see that in a couple of weeks here. But this is.
I think $1 million.
Reasonable increment.
Yeah. So anyway, my guess is that as we've gone through different motor vehicle and T-bills, we add a subdivision every time we add new penalties to this list. And that's why there's 3 listed in 11 and just 1 in 12 and just the 1 in 13. So at some point, we might want to go back in and clean this section up. But for now, this was just to make it consistent. So,
Other questions? Anybody with a thumbs up? Ranking members got a thumbs up? Everybody else, okay. I guess we're almost there.
Public Transit Advisory Council. The Community of Vermont Elders dissolved. So this is replacing their spot on the council with the AARP. The representative of private bus operators and taxi services, they haven't had a taxi service represented on the council. My understanding is in quite a long time. So they're proposing to get rid of that and then to replace intercity bus operators with private bus operators who provide most of the intercity service in the state.
We took testimony from the AARP, we took testimony from Representative Burke. On that piece.
Sounds reasonable to me.
Yeah.
As a member of the council.
I think we were all pretty. I mean, we did get the private bus operator also mentioned in that piece. All right.
And obviously, there's more members. These are the only ones that have been.
Yeah, there were
Who's on the changes?
15 or 20.
have
I'm sure
17.
AARP is very happy to be included.
There's 17 members according to my notes from the testimony. But these are the changes. Right? Yeah, I'm sorry. Did you have something there?
Yeah.
Hear what you said?
Hmm?
I didn't hear what you said there. I'm sorry. Did you have something or?
I said I'm sure AARP is very happy to be.
Yeah, and they did testify, Kelly, right? So I don't think we can make anything out of it. There isn't, right? We're good. That's thumbs up from ranking member and all the way around. Okay? You good? Good.
All right, and then the extension of the public-private partnership sunset from 2026 to 2029. I think AOT testified that there's a potential for another public-private partnership. And so they were asking for an extension to the sunset, which would otherwise be this July 1.
We're okay with them continuing to explore the possibilities of public-private partnership?
Yeah.
Represent what?
It wasn't that specific to that, the purchase of the airport, or am I confusing?
No,
two different-
it's
They specifically mentioned the potential welcome center at the northern. The I-9 entrance, but they could use it elsewhere. And the Berlin one is the only one they're currently using. They were considering it they could consider it for other places, but yes, they did mention that potentially the welcome center of Interstate 89.
Are there any right now?
The Maple Field, well, what is called Maple Field, but it was Maple, some wood, and then became Maple Fields in Berlin, up behind the Applebee's is the only current one.
Yeah.
And that is, you can see all the pamphlets and the,
Yes.
Information and all that.
Inside of those. Yeah, yeah.
and they have quite a parameters over the size and the scope of
Good special.
Any concerns, questions? Thumbs up on this then? I sort of expected some of these to go quick.
all right, and the last is the Transportation Board appellate review for 1111 permits. They are proposing to limit it to applicants or permittees. And I think they testified that they were experiencing some appeals from neighbors over things like a driveway or something like that, and they wanted to limit that.
So I think in this case, maybe somebody gets their permit. And somebody who didn't want it could then say, wait a minute.
Yeah. There,
Appeal.
yeah, there's also, right, so they grant an 1111 permit, which you need any time you're working in the right of way, whether it's to put up a sign, to update a culvert, to widen your driveway, or to add a driveway. But there's also, if you're adding a driveway or adding an entrance or increasing traffic, very likely you're going through zoning and other review. And so there are other avenues for neighbors to appeal the project. And I think what they're,
To not use this. as-
Right.
Yeah, that's what I
I was trying to think of how to characterize this.
Doesn't leave them out of the process.
Yeah, there's still process to appeal development. So if you have a new development going in that needs an 1111 permit for the entrance to, the 40 housing units, you can appeal those housing units in the zoning process as a neighbor. You have,
Beat up the AOT for.
right?
Any other questions about this section? We got thumbs up all around.
Right. That brings us to the effective date. The other sections, other things that I have on the list as potential adds are the Caledonia Airport. Do you want to talk about these now for addition to the next draft? Or do you want to wait till post?
I think we want, looking for a motion to hold that one and potentially that one.
So if you want to just tell me what you'd like added for the next draft, I can put that in.
There's language that was submitted as a potential for the Caledonia County Airport, if you could bring it up anyway.
I can.
Extension, right, of the.
Yeah, I think when you discussed it, you discussed potentially leaving it open-ended if they continue working with the current potential buyer. I'd have to figure out how to draft that, but it's so I rewatched that testimony this morning.
Since there is somewhat of a transportation nexus, this very what's might be happening with the potential for the option tax increase.
Not supposed to, so.
Is that
These are all potential ones those are potential ones that we're going to work on over the next 2 weeks.
okay?
And the ones that we're doing right now are ones that I think are pretty well universally understood and testified in here. But the local option tax on the 2%, since there are people, advocates in the building that would like us to get that into the T-bill. And
That's what I was wondering, is whether we're going to, whether that might be happening or.
you're a proponent of that, and I am still getting on board with the idea that whether we want to try to get it in the T-bill or have the Senate, who's originating the idea, put it in the T-bill and for then us to respond. And that's where
You're
that is right
working
now.
that out with.
But I think that there are some others in our side in the House that would like to see us move forward, and there's others that are very lukewarm perhaps in the administrative side, or maybe not even warm at all. So the question really on that is going to come down to, are we going to push to try to figure it out and put it in? Or are we going to have them put that idea in and send it back to us if they add it there? And so advocating an opinion on that over the next week of break, if you want to advocate that to me, I think I know where you stand, but if other people have an opinion on that, feel free to share it, because that'll be part of what we do or don't set up for the agenda. What was your question? There is a proposal being that in the joint session that we had with the Senate, discussion about local option tax. Of if a town were to go to 2%, there's a proposal to split it 50-40-10. And then we heard some testimony about from League of Cities Town that we don't need more money in the pilot fund, but a splitting of some of that money, the town would get some, and town highways or structures or other overall, with the originating town would get some, and then potential town highway money or town bridges would come out of that. There's some work to do to vet that out and to hear from multiple sides.
Whether
Representative Burke is
that's,
saying
that's the right portion.
whether this is a direction we want to go and get it into the T-bill. It originated, the ideas have mostly come out of the Senate. And whether we should have them do it and then us be in a position to respond, or whether we want to do that work. Because you can't just put it in there without hearing from every affected area, the tax department, the leagues of cities and towns. It has to go to Ways and Means too.
Would that come from
And
That originate, well, we put it in T-bills, but we'd have to have, I've talked to the chair.
she would have to, I believe she's on the idea of
She's-
exploring this idea.
Yes.
That's what I gathered from last night.
Um,
But we want to finish this. That is not one of the things that we're going to put in
sorry,
today.
I was asking
No, no,
because I didn't, we were discussing what might go into.
And I know we're looking at, so for what we want to know that's for certain in, I'm hoping we can finish the two more items that I think everybody's in agreement on. And then everybody will work on the areas that we might want added. Did you find your language?
Here's the Caledonia Airport. So I've scrolled down to the first change. The agency is proposing striking this condition or this requirement. If I recall right from the testimony, this has caused a bit of a hang up with the FAA over how they would insure through 2050. So they've proposed taking it out and just contracting around this issue with the proposed buyer, keeping it open for public use. And then the other piece in here is the extension of the sunset by 18 months. And then I think there was discussion at the very end of the hearing about possibly leaving it open-ended or getting rid of the sunset, provided they work with the existing buyer. There are a couple of different ways to do that. I'm not sure how to condition the sunset date on moving forward with a specific buyer, but I can always work on that. Another option is to require them to notify you if the existing purchase and sale agreement falls through, and then revisiting it at that point.
That's fine. That's in 18 months, they seem extremely confident that it's gonna happen.
Okay.
Um, Yeah, just simple.
Okay. So we can leave it.
Yeah, I would make a motion to approve this and current draft for the transportation. bill.
Anybody else have it? I am communicating with Representative Tomlinson right now.
Oh. I just made a motion.
Geez.
Okay, so thumbs up.
And then the other piece. I mean, what the other language was that we were.
I'm making a motion, there's a motion on the table to add the Caledonia. Everybody, there's a thumbs up to agree. So we're instructing you to add the language requested related to the Caledonia Airport.
Oh. And then was it the Green Mountain Transit Authority language?
What about the transportation alternatives? That's one of the things that we're gonna
We
need.
don't
That's
have
the
it
money.
ready yet. The language and changes,
We'll get back.
not ready yet,
Okay.
but it would be.
Just
on the
wanted to
list.
flag
Yeah,
that.
on the list of potential, yeah,
Okay.
that's what I can give the list after we do this one.
Okay.
Of what, at least what's currently, but there can still be more additions. I would say that, find the right way to say it.
Excuse me.
I think the message of how you might be able to get something in the bill was received, and the actions that I'm seeing are what I need to be able to go forward to get something in the bill. And I think there are multiple of those that are happening, and I feel like people understand that there has to be language, and there has to be proposed, and it has to be read, and it has to be testified. And I see that happening on multiple of the areas. This is by no means saying that we are closing the T-bill additions. This is saying these are the ones we've fully agreed on and embedded and feel are appropriate, or that are ready to go to law into our bill, if that helps, where I feel we're at. I think there are mileage-based user fee has a language that we've seen, but I'm pretty sure we're not settled on it, so it's not going to be brought up today. That's my That's my take on it. I don't think we're.
Yeah.
Is that fair to?
Agreed.
So it's not for today.
We're just picking off the low hanging fruit here.
Yes, and getting it down to what we know is for sure good to go.
Yeah.
But those are out there, but
Yeah.
that's not ready. I don't think that transportation alternative is ready yet, and I don't think that, anything around e-bikes is ready yet. The charging public's not ready yet. That doesn't mean it's Burlington language isn't ready yet, if there is any. So those are all out there as potentially getting in, but they're not at this point. We're ready. I bet you're ready for to get, the thumbs up, if that helps. So there we go. I also want to make sure before we go case one, and then I have one more thing before I can let you go.
Okay, so the language on the screen is Green Mountain Transit's proposed language. As a reminder, it would add anticipated voluntary local match contributions and other non-assessment revenues that could be offered by a member municipality or another public or private source. And it gives the authority permission to seek those contributions. And to accept them for purposes of meeting grant matching requirements and supporting programs, capital projects, and operations. And provides that voluntary local match contributions are in addition to any assessment and don't otherwise affect the regular assessments.
Other property, that was Representative Keeler's question.
Questions?
Yeah, no, it looks good. I moved to include that in the current draft of the T-bill.
And I would make a comment that I am glad that Green Mountain Transit is going in the direction of understanding that they need to market and pursue every possible angle to fill their buses and find other operating revenue. So I
Thought that
appreciate
would have been
the,
done already.
you can add that. So I've seen it, thumbs up. I think I already got them all the way across. We're good with we instruct our ledge council to add it into the next version of the draft, in the next draft version. And everyone else is working on the sections that they've been talked about. And we will look over the next several weeks. Two other side notes. I'm meeting with the clerk and the speaker yesterday, in addition to the meeting with Ways and Means. There is not technically a date for the T-bill. It does not have to be out March 20th. The T-bill and the capital are specifically exempted from any specific date.
We can
rules.
work on it till.
So we can keep it until July 4th. But anyway, that was interesting conversations from yesterday.
Damien is.
However, the speaker is of the speaker does not, she still wants it done by the 20th.
Yeah, I think we want it done.
Yes, and we need to have time for the Senate, but it is interesting to me that, it is. Yes, and then we've always operated that, but boy, I'll tell you, went around and that, you please go down and talk to them about it.
Clerk knows what she's
Big
doing.
bold letters, exceptions are, and
Deadlines are good.
yes, without them.
Deadlines are very good.
So I do also want to, and we're gonna still work to get it out by the 20th. And we don't want to be the reason it would be held up for things. Agency has put a huge effort to go help our neighbors in Rhode Island and Massachusetts. There's been some media, some coverage in there.
Yeah.
Now, there is
Everywhere.
also yes, at least is a good thing.
Yeah.
There is also a underlying lot of, I have received multiple requests, whether they're serious or not, or multiple pieces that, how dare we spend all of this money when we can't, anyway, there's other I want to be very clear from the Agency of Transportation will be reimbursed by the requesting states under the compact, the compact agreement. But I can actually give you a name of what it was called, but there is a emergency aid compact in the way we would get return help from them. That is the requesting states, the EMAC request and other acceptance are offered to set number of personnel, et cetera. That covers personnel, equipment, rates, incidentals, room and meals, and any vehicle maintenance incurred during the deployment from the time the trucks leave until they return. There seems to be some assumption that FEMA would pay Vermont. That's not the way it works. The emergencies in those states would manage it all, but in the compact, they will pay us back for the piece and they will settle up their piece with their own emergency piece. But we are we are part of a compact agreement for the other states. This is not coming out. Yes, we are paying them right now, but we will be reimbursed through the, and I want to make sure everybody's clear about that.
Yeah.
Same for us.
And we would do it, and I'm sure
They would
that
help us
happens
out.
when the storm comes, but I want to make sure that everybody understands yes, we are paying their salaries and their work right now, it will all be reimbursed.
Right.
Okay,
Thank
and I don't know if other people are getting that.
The
be
commute's
honest,
already-
I got multiple reps asking me that. I've gotten feedback, social. I want to be clear of that. That is the official answer from the agency, right from their director of finance. So
Thank you.
Okay.
we appreciate what you're doing.
They pay a
We'll all see you
fee
all
for
next
renting it.
week and a half, and we are adjourned for today.